So this is a big one. How can you tell, and can you tell, if someone is being authentic and in the moment with you versus performing or acting?
Okay, so when we're talking about facial expressions, spontaneous and deliberate facial expressions actually come from separate upper motor neuron pathways. So they are separate. Deliberate expressions emanate from the cortical motor strip, whereas spontaneous expressions emanate from the extrapyramidal motor strip. Not many people can actually manipulate the spontaneous pathway. So most people aren't able to control the expression of spontaneous emotions. So when they are being authentic and natural, an emotion will be expressed as you expect it to be expressed. Whereas because we can't control that other upper motor neuron pathway as authentically, you might see them try and accommodate for that emotion. So for example, when we're sad, these lip corner depressors pull down. It's really difficult to actually manipulate that through the deliberate pathway. It needs to come from the spontaneous pathway because they're very separate.
Mm.
So what you might see instead is then manipulate a muscle that comes from that pathway. Like they'll move the chin up instead of pulling the lip corners down. Just as we don't have what they call the Dutchman smile, we
Mhm.
don't have full control over those muscles
Yes.
under the eyes and the raising of the upper cheeks. So you might see the compensation of certain muscles in the face, but you'll also see a slight lag. So with authentic emotions, they have a more fluid onset and offset. So they actually tend to be a lot faster than deliberate expressions. And compared to falsified and deliberate expressions, they come as the emotion comes. So you don't have to think, this is what I'm expressing, this is what I need to express non-verbally. They come at the exact same time. So
Mm.
that's when that lag, only a slight lag, but a lag will occur when they are faking an expression because they have to cognitively say, this is the emotion I want to express, and then express it.
Right. And there's actually a really interesting conversation around like performance and acting as being synonymous to faking it, right? I think those two concepts are actually very, very different, especially
Yes.
if we're thinking about, right? Like, you and I are
Yeah.
both performers in our own rights. And, we would never think of our performances as going out there and faking it, right? Like that's absolutely
Yeah.
the opposite of what we want to be doing. So just to know that for our listeners, right? It's actually in some ways it can be very helpful to think of a presentation as a performance, but the performance piece is really the presentation of whatever it is that you're communicating, which again is not the same as faking something, right? So you
Yeah.
can have a very authentic performance.
Yeah, and I think it's important to take into consideration the context as well. So if you are having a very deep and personal conversation and that person really needs to be in tune with you, and you are seeing maybe that chin come up instead of the lip corner
Mm.
depressors, that is a cause for concern because they're not actually expressing genuine emotion there. Whereas if we're talking about a presentation, you should expect some over expression and you should expect some not falsified but deliberate expressions
Yes.
because that goes along with the presentation. So it is very important to
Right.
take into consideration the context and what emotion is being, I guess, falsified or deliberately expressed. Because if they're deliberately expressing empathy,
Mm.
that might be a cause for concern. Because although we want to show empathy, we also want the person that is being empathetic to be authentically
Yes.
empathetic. Whereas a false smile, even though we're very sensitive to it, isn't really as harmful as faking sadness can be.
Right. Right. So I feel like we could have a much larger conversation about this topic, so we
Yeah.
might do a follow on to that, but really interesting, right? The difference between falsifying something and deliberately deciding to express something else, how those two things are different, and then of course what to kind of look for. And a lot of it comes down to the synchrony, right? The synchrony of
Yes.
expression. I think one big example of like this jarring quality to communication can come often when people are almost overcoached, right? And you'll see things
Yeah.
like, hello,
Yeah.
right? And there's this, again, this lack of congruence between like the open gesture of welcome and the statement, right? And that to us can, or to the audience, can often feel very jarring. So
Yeah.
that's, I feel like, a great example of what you just explained. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think a way to combat that, and what I always say is, don't just force it. If you want to be someone that is perceived a certain way, practice it and practice it and practice it, and really make it part of your natural behavioral repertoire rather than just something you use as a tool. Oh, I know I should feel this then, so I'll use this as a tool when I need it. Really make it authentic, because like I
Mm.
said, because they do stem from two different pathways, we can practice something and then it becomes automatic. That's the whole point of practicing. It's the same with nonverbals. When we start to act a certain way regularly, neurons that wire together fire together. It becomes a habit, it becomes embedded, so it can become a very natural behavior. It just takes practice.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. That is such a crucial point in any conversation around authenticity, right?
Yeah.
Because so if I'm, and I'm sure you need the same thing in coaching sessions, but if I'm facilitating something and we're practicing new expressions of emotion or whatever, and it can feel very inauthentic because it's something you've literally never
Yeah.
done, and there's a lot of muscle memory in the way we show up, in the way we hold ourselves, in the way we do articulate or not articulate our hands, and it takes a moment of practice to rewire some of those trajectories, right, to build new muscle memory and new habits.
Yeah.
So fantastic point. Awesome.